In the last 6 months, I've fallen in love with what I think is arguably the best format in Magic the Gathering right now. And no, it's not Commander. This is of course a bit of a bold claim, but stick around and I'll share how I got into it. I'll give you 6 reasons why I think it's so very good, and why you should get into it too. As you can probably already hear, this is probably going to sound a little bit scuffed because I'm recovering from losing my voice and now it's cooked again because I talked too much at playing my locals last night for this very format. Go figure. Before I commence my sales pitch about why you should join me in this absolute banger of a format, I should first share how I was lured into the back of this cardboard-filled van to begin with. I've been wanting to get back into 60 card Magic for quite a while. This is after all how I started playing Magic in the first place a very long time ago. Some of my core Commander playgroup moved across the country and it made getting good Commander games just that much harder than it needed to be. And I felt that I just wasn't getting quite as much of that Magic fix that I needed. I looked around at my options and both of the most accessible formats in Modern and Standard were pretty pricey, and honestly the available decks just didn't excite me that much. There was nothing that looked fun enough to outweigh the high cost of entry. I also hadn't played in competitive formats in so long that it felt a little bit intimidating, so I ended up just not getting into anything. Then November of last year rolled around, and a good friend said they were looking into building a Pauper deck after being heavily baited by an Andrea Mengucci video. A video with a sentence, tap 2 mana to play Fanatical Offering, and I'll sacrifice my Ica Wellspring to draw 3 cards and make a map, made the dopamine receptors in said friend's brain light up like the night sky. Ancestral Recall at home is still Ancestral Recall. Despite the promise of copious amounts of brain chemicals, I was open-minded but not that interested. After all, I thought, how fun could a format limited to commons really be? Man, was I wrong. I think that for each of us in life, the things that catch our eye and draw us in are going to be different. But what first really got my attention with Pauper was that Affinity was playable here. I did a complete U-turn from I don't care about this at all to I need all of this right now, and in a few days I had an order in for a shiny new Pauper deck. I had played Affinity back in Standard in 2004. Yes, I am hurtling towards the grave. It's one of my all-time favorite competitor decks, so the prospect of running it back here brought both just the right amount of nostalgia and comfort to push me over the precipice of my LGS. Affinity is, however, just the tip of the iceberg and arguably the least exciting when it comes to the cool stuff that's on offer here. Let's start with the first of the reasons why you should join me in the Pauper van. And that's that Pauper is cool as fuck, filled with interesting cards and powerful decks. Don't be mistaken like I was and thinking that Pauper decks are going to be lame, weak or boring just because they're filled with commons. It's probably worth clarifying that Pauper is a 60 card constructed format much like Standard or Modern, but that the available card pool outside of banned cards includes any card that has been printed at common rarity at some point in Magic's history. The play meta is also incredibly broad with so many different archetypes and styles of decks available. From explosive mono-red burn decks to mono-blue aggro and tempo decks filled with counter magic and either Big Snake or Trixie Fae. Or perhaps you love elves and could be ramping aggressively into incredibly powerful threats. Perhaps like me you like artifacts, then you've got various types of Affinity or Tron decks waiting for you. Or what about a deck that wins by making a random creature a game-ending threat simply by using a land? These are just a few of the many, and I mean many, cool experiences you can have in Pauper, and I haven't even mentioned the deck that wins by recycling cats. As I've said, there are just so many decks that you can go through, and I'm highly recommending something like Mengu's Workshop or going to look at the recent Pauper Geddon results if you're curious about specific decks or experiences. I will, however, give you at least a taste of some of the cool stuff that's on offer. If you're on the casual end of the Commander player base, you probably just want to cast big creatures and turn them sideways. Elves is probably a great choice and is one of the strongest decks in Pauper right now, as evidenced by the fact that it just won Pauper Geddon, which is basically like the World Championships of Pauper that happens in Italy. You could go turn 1 Forest and then play a Llanowar Elf. Turn 2, you could go Forest, Priest of Titania, and play a Quirion Ranger. On turn 3, you could tap the Forest for mana, then tap the Priest of Titania, giving you 4 total mana. Then you can bounce the Forest and play it again for another mana, then tap your Priest of Titania again for another 3, giving you a total of 8 mana. You can then tap your last Forest for a total of 9 mana, and you can now do all sorts of cool things. Perhaps you'd spend 3 of it to cast a Lead the Stampede, which will almost certainly draw you like 4 or 5 cards. Or perhaps you want to be more threatening. You could bestow a Nyxborn Hydra on your Llanowar Elf, making it an 8/8 with Reach and Trample and swing in for 8 damage. That's not bad for turn 3, and if someone kills the elf, the Hydra sticks around as a 7/7. Absolutely busted. Perhaps you're more of a spell-slinging mage. Then Mono Red Burn could allow you to do some very cool things. On turn 1, you could play a Mountain and then play a Faithless Looting, discarding say a Sneaky Snacker and a Lava Dart. On turn 2, you could play a Grab the Prize, discarding another Sneaky Snacker, dealing 2 damage to your opponent and seeing both Snackers return to the battlefield. Turn 3 you could say, plot a highway robbery, and then attack with both of your snackers for 4 damage to your opponent, bringing them down to 14. And on turn 4, you could play a gutter snipe, then cast your plotted highway robbery for free, dropping your opponent to 12. Discarding say a fiery temper which you can then cast, dropping your opponent to 7. You can then attack with your snackers, dropping your opponent to 3 and flashback your lava dart to win the game. And that's not even talking about what would have happened if you had a fire blast, which of course you could cast for free and do another 6 damage. Perhaps like me, you're more of a control player, and you love the idea of using the Tron lands to make and abuse a lot of mana. There are multiple Tron variants, but Flickertron could be right up your alley. A deck where your early turns are all about getting your Tron lands online, after which you have a lot of mana and can do some pretty game-breaking stuff. Your goal is to play creatures and spells with powerful effects and then flicker them and recur them over and over to grind your opponent out of the game. Effects like making your opponent never have another combat step, or bouncing all their permanents, or you gaining tons of life. It's a greedy strategy, but one that feels very rewarding when it comes online. As I said earlier, this is just the tip of the iceberg. There are tons and tons and tons of different viable decks available that can compete with the best decks in the format. I'll give you some of these in colourful names, but you can go check these out in the top 64 of Pauper, which is linked down below the like button. There's decks like Free Artifacts, or Eldrucy Midrange, or perhaps the powerhouse of Blue Snake. There's Fey Trixies, the ever-vexing Big Boggle, Cat Meat Grinder, Angry Birds 2, Small White Guys, Vampire Burninate, Big Mana, and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Psychic Damage. You get the idea. There really is something for everyone, and like everyone who plays Pauper, you'll think you found your favorite deck that's your one true love, only to match into someone, have absolutely no clue what they're playing, get absolutely wrecked, and then develop a hyperfixation on their deck and how you can build or play something similar. Fortunately for both of us, Pauper decks are very cheap. Cheap decks that I love very much, and that's a big reason that Pauper is better than Commander. Now before you pick up your pitchforks, that statement is somewhat in jest. These are two very different formats with different goals, and I still love Commander. So fear not, Frog Army, my yapping about Commander isn't going anywhere anytime soon. But nothing is perfect, and despite loving Commander, there are a few things that occasionally get my goat. Things that I really don't struggle with when I play Pauper. The first is a big one, which is winning. If you've watched a bunch of my stuff, you'll know that while I play to win in Commander, I really don't care about winning the game that much. It is to me a social format, and I'll often make decisions and plays that are counterproductive to winning if I think they will enhance the game or the mood of the pod in some way. I often feel like this clashes with the people that I sit across the table from, and I feel like far too often in Commander, people project that they are casual and just want vibes, but then vibes often really just mean that they want to get their way, and getting their way often means winning or dominating the game. And if they don't get those things, then there is grumbling, sulking, or unhappiness. I get that this is painting with a very broad stroke, and that's probably not you, but in contrast to this, I thoroughly appreciate the binary nature of a format like Pauper. Both players want to win, and we are both going to try our very best to do that. No apologies if we blow up each other's stuff, or when we swing in for lethal, and no weary eyeballs when we counter spells. The very clear defined rules and social expectations are surprisingly freeing here, and there is a beauty in the simplicity that makes Pauper games feel somehow a lot less competitive than most of my Commander games. I think this is partially because the time investment per game is a lot lower and both parties are sitting down half expecting to lose. In a format like this, you have to be very comfortable losing with the baggage and bruised ego that comes with it. Whereas in Commander, many people simply haven't become comfortable with losing and they are playing a very casual format with a veiled competitive mindset. A bit like that member of your family that takes a board game like Monopoly way too seriously and crashes out if they aren't cosplaying a 2026 landlord. Finishing a game of Pauper for me usually comes with an engaged and warm discussion about what either player did well or could have done better, and enthusiastic discussions about each other's decks, the cards, and thought patterns. This is the Magic that I fell in love with as a kid. People out to enjoy Magic cards, to make friends, but also to win. An environment where learning and improving is as important and as much the goal as playing. Despite being Commander being the casual format, my experience hanging out with the Pauper gang at my LGS in Sydney has felt decidedly more casual. The second thing that stood out to me, and this may just be a raging ADHD thing, is how much I enjoy the pace of the game. One of the things that I like least about Commander is waiting. Too often there are slow turns and big pauses, and the more time sat thinking about playing Magic than actually playing the game itself. Or in my case, my brain running rampant thinking about 4,000 things, and I came here to play some Magic the fucking Gathering. And look, I say this as someone that highly encourages all sorts of banter and yapping during a Commander game. But far too often Commander games, especially at lower powers, are just painfully slow. And far too often people mistake yapping for yapping about things outside of the game. But if we've come to play Magic, I want to play Magic. With lots of love, I don't want to look at pictures of pets, talk about the war, or even about Project Hail Mary, which is wild because all I want to talk about is my boy Rocky and Project Hail Mary. But let's do that before or after the magic. And I think that the movie reference here is actually really valid because if you try to talk to me while I'm watching a movie, it damn better be about the movie that we're watching and not some random topic. If we're playing Magic, let's play and talk about the game of Magic that we're playing. I don't face that problem when I'm playing Pauper. And playing Pauper, I'll get at least 6 games in the same time it takes to play like one bracket 2 Commander game. And that's including banter, thoughtful discussion, and even talking about non-Magic things afterwards. Honestly, this cadence has made it very difficult to endure subpar Commander games that I would previously have suffered through just because I wanted to play Magic. That and the other stuff that I've mentioned so far and will mention are a big reason why my playgroup is often more keen to break out our Pauper decks and run a bunch of games than we are to play a game of Commander. If you're enjoying this, throw me a like because you can probably hear how I'm struggling through this to get you this video. 75% of my regular viewers aren't subbed, so click all of the buttons to reward the hardworking frog and to make sure that you receive my next banger directly into your eyeballs. Also, I will be live on Twitch this Saturday at 8 PM Eastern Time for the US or 10 AM for the Australians. Sorry Europe, it's going to be really late. I'll be working through some decks and answering questions, so come hang out. I'll put a link that down below, right below the like and subscribe buttons. So I've already talked about the people a little bit, but I think there are a few things that should make the people of Pauper a big drawing card for you if you're playing other formats and especially only Commander. I have been very pleasantly surprised by the people that I've encountered in my brief Pauper journey. A long time ago, I quit playing Magic. I did so because I was sat at a Magic event, I looked around and I said to myself, I am not one of these people, and I got up and left. I never really felt proud of how I felt at that moment, but it didn't make the feelings any less valid. I did so because many of the stereotypes that existed about the TCG community were present all around me. Times have definitely changed, but the hardcore competitive formats still tend to attract a bunch of people that have, shall we say, undesirable traits. Things like bad hygiene, poor social skills, and/or limited or backwards worldviews. So I have been very happy to find that my experiences in Pauper recently have been very different. People have been friendly, intelligent, socially engaging despite being there to play to win, surprisingly casual and whimsical. Though I suppose that shouldn't be too surprising given we're here to play with decks full of commons, many of which are 20 years old. The people have been competitive, but in my experience not try-hard, and are as comfortable in loss as they are gracious in victory. Something that many a Commander player could learn. As a good example of this, it's hard to forget the first time I played at my now local LGS. I had built an Esper affinity list that I found online and unknowns to me had some fairly recently banned cards in it. I was halfway through a game when I played one and someone tapped me on the shoulder and said, "You know that's banned, right?" Obviously to my shock, I did not. I laughed, then cried inside and moved the illegal cards out of my deck. Fortunately for me, no one made a scene and everyone was very nice about it. It seemed more hilarious than anything else. I can see a situation like that going very differently elsewhere. That could very easily have been a situation where I would have been made to feel embarrassed, ashamed, and probably leave to not come back. So if you're part of my Pauper Locals gang, you may all take this as a big compliment and I promise you I'll come to the pub after Locals in the not too distant future. In contrast to Pauper, Commander often feels like many people are more excited to show off their deck, take up space, and win the special little boy prize than they are to be excited about playing the actual game or something cool that someone else has done. Granted, that means someone else needs to be doing something cool and new to begin with, which is often not the case in Commander as people run around with precons and EDH rec net decks. In contrast, people will regularly ask to see each other's decks at Pauper or excitedly inquire about a deck or card that they haven't seen before, and that happens a lot. All in all, this is quite ironic, because the traits that I am attaching to Pauper you think would apply more to the whimsical casual format of Commander. One of my favorite things about Pauper is the low barrier to entry. You can, as numerous people I've encountered have done, assemble a cohesive deck just simply from the bulk you have obtained from a certain set that you love. Whether it's a pile of cool space cards if you loved Edge of Eternities, or it's a lore-faithful Avatar deck, you're almost certainly not going to 3-0 on the night at Locals, but you will enjoy playing with the cards you love, and you'll have a good time, which is really the point. Beyond the bulk bins, the best decks in Pauper cost little more than a new Commander precon. Yes, that's right, you can be at the format's most competitive, and even win the world's biggest Pauper event with thousands of players for well under $100. The barrier to entry in this incredible format is very low. And yes, you can buy a Commander Precon for a similar price as a top tier Pauper deck, but one of those plays like a Precon and the other feels like a finely tuned and well-oiled CDH machine. As much as I love Commander, the average Commander Precon when compared to a top tier Pauper deck limits your ability to play, experience, and learn. Pauper decks, whilst powerful, for example some can combo out and win the game on turn 3, are much simpler than both competitive decks in other formats and the mind-melting board states and stacks that exists in Commander. This makes the format particularly approachable for newer or more casual players. Hell, even for a more tenured player like me, it's nice to be able to sit down and understand what a deck is doing well after the first game in a set and be able to have a decent shot to win in game 2. What about if you live in a small town in the middle of nowhere with no LGS like I did when I was a kid? Well, you can play Pauper on MTGO, so it's accessible to everyone, everywhere. Whether you are a player that's new to Magic or just a long-time Commander player that wants something different, the barrier to entry here is so very low, but the upside is so very high. Given most people watching this are probably Commander players, I cannot emphasize enough how bad of a learning environment Commander is. Playing a 60-card format like Pauper will make you a much better player and will help you understand concepts like deck building far more quickly. Pauper as a format and the decks within the format, whilst powerful, are mechanically simple, and this makes it even better for learning all about Magic. One of the best learning tools that a format like this has is the size of the feedback loop. The distance between making a decision and seeing the effects or outcomes of that decision is so much smaller than Commander, and it gives you a ton more data points to analyze and opportunities to learn. So much so that I'm going to make an entire video about what I think Commander players can learn from playing Pauper. Hopefully by the time that video comes out, you'll have picked up Pauper and we can compare notes. Something that I absolutely love about Pauper is how it teaches you to do more with less. The inherent limitations of the format breed creativity and teach a lesson that I've already been preaching about a bunch in Commander, but many still have yet to learn, and that's that budget Magic is probably the best Magic. It's very easy to end up with tons of Commander decks, many of which cost hundreds if not thousands of dollars, especially if one's playing at higher power levels. There's a feeling of needing to keep up and to run all the powerful staples and game changers, and before you know it, you spent hundreds of dollars on a deck or experience that you may not even end up liking. Yet here in Pauper, I play a deck that feels as strong as and is as fun to pilot as a deck that would cost thousands of dollars in bracket 4. Based. Now that you've sat through the majority of my propaganda, I'm going to reiterate that I still thoroughly enjoy Commander. This isn't a rant against Commander, but playing Pauper for the past 6 or so months has made me realize that I was missing something that Commander simply couldn't provide. I'll also add that there are obviously other great formats as well, whether it's limited, cube, or something weird like Kingdoms, but Pauper is uniquely positioned to be great, especially for new, casual, or Commander-only players, and especially if you're on a budget. So I encourage you to go on the same journey that I have, because hell, it's not going to cost much, and I'm pretty confident that you'll learn a lot, will have a bunch of fun, and will likely make some new friends along the way. I hope you found this useful, and I'd love to hear whether you've tried Pauper or other Magic formats that you love, and equally yeet any questions that you have about Pauper in the comments because I would love to help you get into it. If you want to support what I do, now that I am nearly voiceless, smash up the like button or head over to my Patreon, and a big thank you to everyone that supports me over there. And if you want some personalized tailored help, or you're just horribly rich and want to jettison some money, you can find that over on my Ko-fi, all of which you will find the links to down below the like button. If you like this, go and check out one of these other videos if you haven't seen them already, and as always, thank you for being here.